If you ask Londoners where human trafficking happens, they might say overseas, they might say Mexico, New York, or even Toronto. But the truth is it's happening right here in London. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Christine Teleski. On this week's show, we're taking a closer look at London's sex trade. I'll be talking one-on-one with a local woman who was lured into a life of drugs, sex, and abuse. I'll also be joined here on the panel by some of the people who are working hard to liberate victims and protect others from falling into the same trap. And we want to hear from you. 519-672-1313 is the number to call with your questions and comments. But first, I had the opportunity to sit down with Stacey, a former sex trade worker who was kind and brave enough to share her story. Here's what she had to say. So Stacey, what I think is so compelling about your story is that the way it started out, you were married, you were successful, you were a homeowner, you were financially independent, but somehow you ended up struggling with alcohol, with drugs, with abuse, with homelessness, and with prostitution. Tell me a little bit about how that happened.
Okay, I think the first and most important thing to say is I was all of those things, but I was also human. And it makes anybody vulnerable to coercion or manipulation or especially people who want to believe in love, because you're raised to believe that, oh, the knight in shining armor is going to come along, and I really did think that he did. I lost my husband, I lost my friends, and I struggled with depression due to that, and I was introduced to this guy who I thought, and he led me to believe that he was going to take care of me and it would all be well, and I believed him. I was very vulnerable at the time and needed him. I needed someone to help me, and unbeknownst to me, he had ulterior motives.
What was the lowest point for you?
Ironically enough, there was a lot of trauma and a lot of serious ugliness, but the lowest point for me was when I lost my mother's ashes. That was my lowest point. I could handle everything else, but I considered myself the keeper, the safekeeper of her, and then when that was gone, I had nothing left. Nothing.
How bad did it actually get before you were able to sort of turn things around and get yourself out of that situation?
Well, I was locked in a house. All the doors were taken off, so I couldn't hide. My toes were all broken, so I couldn't walk, and men were being brought home. And I had no choice in the matter.
So how did you finally manage to get out of that situation?
I phoned the women's shelter on Clarkside Road. They put me in a cab and got me to them, but there was no space for me, so I had to go back to him, and I found the Salvation Army. And they hid me for a while. Unfortunately, he found me there again, but then security there literally formed a circle around me because they became aware of the situation and got me into a cab and got me back into another women's shelter. And it was he found me at the shelters, so the shelters had to keep moving me. Mm-hmm. And eventually, 4 months after my last day in the last shelter, they got me into housing. And I haven't looked back since. But this is an 8-year story.
And now you're in the process of slowly rebuilding your life. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I finished high school 30 years later. I'm applying to Fanshawe this week, and my goal is to get back into the shelters and those environments, but on the other side of the desk, to help other women.
Tell me, I guess you've been with now the London Anti-Human Trafficking Committee for about a year.
Yep.
Tell me why you decided to join, what you're hoping to accomplish.
I didn't know they existed. I joined, well, I was helping a group called WISP, which is associated through my sister's place, the organization downtown, and they are doing research on prostitution downtown London. And I went to a WISP meeting, and Aura Burdett from the Salvation Army was there, and she is on the London Anti-Human Trafficking Committee. And I was introduced to her, and once again, I never looked back. That day changed my life.
How do we keep this from happening to other women in our community?
Well, one thing I do is I walk the streets and I talk to people. I hand out posters. Education is huge. I also think stronger legislation. And I know a lot of people aren't going to agree with me on this one, but I don't think that legalizing prostitution should happen, because it then enables the perpetrators, i.e. the men, the traffickers, to act with impunity.
So if we're, I guess, to protect women from this situation, it would be education and it would be harsher penalties.
Yes, for the bad people.
Not for the women.
No, because I also work at the John, help talk to the men at the John School, and I say to these men, I may have even been the one to solicit you, but when someone is putting themselves in that position, it's without a choice. I call it rape with permission. So yeah, we need to educate and stop these people from behaving in this manner.
Absolutely. If there's any other women watching out there that may be in a similar situation to what you were in, do you have a message you'd like to get out to them?
Yeah, get a hold of us. We're there. We want to help you. Please don't hesitate. Pick up the phone. Even if you're not ready to leave, pick up the phone, call somebody and talk to us. It's the London Anti-Human Trafficking Committee at the Salvation Army, but you can call LOC, London Abused Women's Centre. You can call any of the shelters. They're educated. They know what they're doing. Please get yourself out.
Thank you so much, Stacey. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking more with our panel about how a woman like Stacey can end up being a victim of human trafficking. Stay tuned.
Sure, it's not something that I've necessarily thought too much about, but I think that it's happening. It's been happening for as long as civilization has existed. It's the oldest job, they say, right? And it's not an ideal at all the way it's happening, right? It's not safe at all for the women, for the sex workers. So yeah, for sure, I would be interested in hearing about some alternatives to the current underground system, absolutely.